Hi, I'm HistoricNerd. Let's talk about the Philips CDi. Me, like many other Americans, the first time I heard about it was through the Angry Video Game Nerd. And ultimately, his video presentation gave me a rather negative view of the system. So, like many other people, I thought it was kind of a joke garbage platform that really wasn't based in a lot of experience with it. It was just kind of someone else's second-hand account of it. So, for me, the Philips CDi wasn't something I'd heard about. I think many North Americans didn't really know about it. Those who did were probably more privy to like hi-fi electronic stores, things like that. But because its initial run in the United States, a lot of the commercials for it were late-night infomercials that me, when I was younger, just didn't watch. So, with that being said, let's go into the first time I got a Philips CDi, or the first time I played a CDi. So for me, the first time I got a CDi was a long time before I actually was able to play it. And that's because in North America, controllers are incredibly hard to find, or the ones that are around are very expensive. So, that being said, I found one at a thrift store one time for about $10. I was pretty happy with it because I saw it laying around in a CD section, so it was a CD player, or listed as one anyway. But then it looked familiar because I thought I had seen the profile before. Flipped it around, and S-video and composite out on the back. So that was kind of a cool thing to find, and I was very happy about it. So I took it home, tested it, because you can play basic music CDs in it, and it'll play those no problem without a controller. But you can't really do any of the games without that. So you kind of hit this wall there. So for me, I couldn't play the CDi because I didn't have a controller for it. So it sat on my shelf for about 2 years until Yahel from Restless Gaming sent me his infrared controller. But unfortunately that didn't work with my model for whatever reason. So at that point I was determined to see if the console worked or could play games even. So I dropped $50 and ordered a mouse for it, which was probably the cheapest controller option there was, at least on eBay at the time. So the cool thing about the CDi is any controller ever made for the system will work with any of the games. So it's kind of a cool little expanded thing there. So the mouse will work with any game, the light gun will work with any game, and it's a pretty neat thing in that regard. So once I got that going, it was pretty cool checking that stuff out. So I got to play it about 2 years after I got it. So long story short. Do you think the CDi deserves the hate it gets? Was a question I got. No, it really doesn't deserve the hate it gets. That's because the CDi is a misunderstood platform. When it came to the United States, it was never intended to be a game console alone. It was meant to take over the living room as a multimedia delivery device. It was supposed to be a home computer, a VCR, and a gaming system all rolled into one as a means to entertain you and kind of take over the living room. That's how Philips wanted you to experience it. And unfortunately, the CDi falls into this camp where, because AVGN made a video about it that was incredibly scathing and negative, that has influenced a lot of people's popular opinion about it. And it's kind of not really deserved, because the system really it never meant itself to be an exclusive game console. It was meant to be a lot of other things. And so it just got roped into that whole thing. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Zelda games on it are probably among the worst games ever made. So those games rightfully deserve the hate they get, because they're just plain bad. But Hotel Mario, on the other hand, is actually a pretty solid puzzle platformer that really doesn't deserve any of the hate it gets. It's a pretty decent game. But yeah, so my thoughts there. But another question would be, what makes the CDi special to me? And that, to me, has to do with the fact the CDi is a true underdog. Despite the fact Philips spent $1 billion marketing and selling it, it still was an underdog, because it just wasn't understood when it came out. It's still not really understood now. But it tried to do a lot of things at the time that was relatively unheard of. It wanted to be a lot of things, and even in 1996 it was offering internet connectivity. And you know, back in the day before the internet was widely available, everyone had encyclopedias. And then they got encyclopedia discs, and then they kind of expanded to just getting rid of those and moving to the internet. And the CDi offered that in an all-in-one home experience. But yeah. So my favorite CDi games would have to be Thunder in Paradise, followed by a number of other titles. But Thunder in Paradise, most notably because it is a 90s nostalgic thrill ride that you quite can't pass up. There's no experience quite like it, playing an FMV game where you get to hang out with Hulk Hogan and one of the kids from Step by Step, while reliving one of the episodes of the show. Which is honestly a pretty innovative idea, because the game kind of sells itself as interactive television. Which really, when you think about it, and the Philips CDi and what it intended to be, is it didn't want to be just a game console, it wanted to be a lot of other things. So that game right there personifies what the Philips CDi was trying to be, and that was a multimedia entertainment device that extended beyond that. And if you're like me and you like FMV titles, the CDi offers a wide variety of them. Like namely, like Seventh Guest, and one of my favorites would be Braindead 13, which, ironically, is actually probably one of the best versions is on the CDi, because other versions of it on the 3DO and the Sega Saturn cut a lot of stuff out of the game for whatever reason. So you lose certain intro pieces and other key kind of markers in the game that made it pretty decent. That, honestly, it's the truest port of the PC version of the game. Yeah. Next, how do you think the CDi could be successful, or could have been successful when it came out? And a lot of it has to do with the CDi was a failed marketing pitch in a lot of respects. It just didn't know what it wanted to be, so marketing didn't know how to sell it, they didn't know how to push it to people. And so consumers just were confused by the product in general and kind of passed it up. And another big hampering to the CDi was the fact that when it came to market, it was over $700, which automatically moved it into the hi-fi appliance arena, which a lot of people just can't do. So it moved it out of the general consumers and into the hands of, people who had more money than they really knew what to do with. So unfortunately, the system just didn't catch on with the mainstream audiences it needed. So as a VCR, it was too expensive. As a home media device, it was too expensive. As a computer, it might have been, right around the right price point it needed to be, but it couldn't do a lot of the same things a computer could do, despite the fact it wanted to be. And then as a gaming device, unfortunately, it was developed with current generation tech at 16-bit, so it was, on par with Super Nintendo in some respects, but in different ways anyway. So the system was ahead of its time, but behind the time. And so ultimately it just couldn't find a niche. So the CDi suffered because of that. And another thing would be pretty much all the games for the Philips CDi were basically paid for by Philips to be developed. And Philips isn't a game maker. If they got more third-party developers on board to make games for it, who knows where the system could have gone, but unfortunately that high price point kind of limited it. So yeah. Hi. Just want to say thank you for watching Historic Nerd today. I understand this is a little different than some of the content I've done in the past, but I figured this was kind of a fun experiment. This video was done in collaboration with Top Hat Gaming Man, which was put together with a number of other YouTube creators to talk about the Philips CDi. So if you want to go check out his work, I'll try and post a link in the comment below. But definitely want to thank you for dropping by and watching what you have, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, day, or night, or whatever it is you're doing. Bye.